Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle. We're going to talk a little bit about USC football. That's not a huge surprise, and probably a little bit about pop culture. Also not a surprise. Usual crew, Mark Holkin, Eric McKinney, and me, your guest host, Chris Arledge. Let's start where we always start these days because it's really what's going on in college football, and that is recruiting. So USC had their third of the three big June recruiting weekends this past weekend. Let's talk a little bit about who was there, what, if anything, has come of it, and then maybe we can have some further big picture thoughts after that. Who wants to start? Who wants to tell us what happened this weekend? Nobody wants to. Mark, go ahead.
No, nobody.
Actually, I'll start, and Eric can clean up the mess when I'm done on aisle 4. So it was interesting. I was talking with Scott on the phone last night, saying, is it just me, or does it feel like this official visit weekend had a lot of quietness to it? It just felt like there wasn't a lot of energy behind this weekend compared to the previous, June bash that they had June 7th. And then, I know the numbers weren't as big as the other one, and I know you had some guys that were supposed to be on this trip that did not come. So I think there's a little bit of I'll use it because I just saw the word recently, a little bit of lethargy around this weekend. I don't want to say there was apathy because people definitely still care. But I think right now everyone's like, you know what? We've been through this before. We've seen a whole bunch of June bat signals being thrown up. We're still waiting on the ones that were thrown up a couple weeks ago, at least 3 of them. We had another one that we saw over the weekend that hasn't come out publicly. So we don't know what's going on. So as far as, what came out of this weekend, I don't know. I know that going into the weekend, Coach Shawnua, sent out a message on X. He didn't mention any names specifically, but the message was very clear. We're still USC. If you don't want to be here, that's great, but we're going to fight with the guys we have. And I like the guys in my foxhole. I really like that analogy, by the way. Now, I don't know what anybody anticipates coming out of this weekend. I'm hoping that their enthusiasm has been tempered a little bit, especially going into this dead period, because for the next 30 days, that's where we're at. So the only communication we're going to have is electronic, phone, texting, that type of stuff between coaches and players. There's no more evaluations. There's no more, in-home visits. There's no more kids coming for unofficial visits. We're kind of in I'll say no man's land right now, just waiting for the recruits to show their enthusiasm, because we know the staff, they're working as hard as they can behind the scenes. So plus there's all the other gray area stuff that's going on that I'm sure we'll talk about as well. Eric, clean up on aisle 4.
So there were some commits there. I think you solidify some of those guys. The 2 big names, defensive linemen, Elijah Griffin, another defensive lineman from Georgia, somehow ranked even higher than the 2 guys that they had committed and that ended up out of the class now, probably going to end up at Georgia, which is kind of what we've said about them forever. And then Jared Smith too is an edge guy from Alabama. Again, trying to go into Alabama to get a really, really talented defensive lineman. These are not layups that USC coaches are trying to shoot here on the recruiting trail. I think it feels like you did enough to keep them interested to probably bring them out again on an unofficial. If you can do that, then you just try to stay in the mix. This whole recruiting scene, this whole recruiting class to me is the Schrodinger's recruiting class, kind of, where it's a great class and it's a terrible class at the same time, and the box doesn't open until you see what the record is and how the team plays. I mean, that's sort of what it is for me, is you try to position yourself as well as you can for these guys that you think are really good players. And I just don't know if you, as a USC coach, know how much you can actually count on signing them and getting them until you actually play the games. You can bring them in, you can show them the campus, you can show them practice, you can do any of that stuff. If you play really good defense and are competitive and are in games and win games in the fall, I think you can sign a really good recruiting class. If you can't do it defensively and you lose a bunch of close games, even if you play kind of well, if you end up with 6 wins, 7 wins, and you're not being talked about as a big time team at the end of the year, boy, is that going to be easy for other programs to recruit against. And no, you're not going to land a really good defensive lineman from Georgia when Georgia's in the 12-team playoff, or Alabama if Alabama's in the 12-team playoff. So again, it's you're getting guys on campus, right? You've checked that box as Lincoln Riley and the program. Like, there was a while where you weren't even getting these guys on campus. So yes, that's a good thing. Do you know what kind of chance you have with these guys yet? I don't think we really do until they actually start playing and they can see, okay, that's what the defense looks like. Defense specifically. That's the key thing for them this year.
Yeah, that all makes sense. There are a couple of things we should keep in mind, and I think people forget this when they start following recruiting. One is, does anybody realize how difficult it is to get inside the mind of a 17 or 18-year-old boy? I mean, really. And you have all these people outside the program. I mean, we talk about USC football all the time, and we're right sometimes, we're wrong sometimes. But I think you need to approach this with a little bit of humility. You have so many people outside the program who, based on unnamed sources, are making assertions that, well, this is what happened, that's what happened. Even if you knew these kids, even if you knew them well, you don't necessarily know what they're going to do, because they're high school boys. And if you don't know them, the idea that some random guy on YouTube, including me, is going to be able to tell you this is what's going to happen with this recruit, or this is why this guy decommitted, strikes me as just a little bit silly. A little bit of humility probably makes sense here. We have relatively little information, not just us. We actually have decent sources inside the program. I'm just saying, everybody has relatively limited information. It's entirely possible that the coaches don't know a lot about what's going on inside these kids' heads, and I can assure you the coaches aren't telling outsiders everything they do know. So a little bit of humility probably makes some sense. We don't know what some of these guys are going to do. There are some rules that hold true. It's hard to pull kids far away from home. It happens. It might happen this year. It's hard to do it. It's especially hard to do it when the kid comes from one of those states where the local university football team is like a religion, right? I mean, and look, if USC has a lot of fans who love USC football, but if you grew up in Southern California and you don't understand, go to one of these other states and realize it's different. It's different. You run into a lot of USC fans in LA, as you should. It's not the same thing as being an Alabama fan in Alabama, or a Georgia fan in Georgia, or an Oklahoma fan in Oklahoma. It's not the same. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to pull kids out of places where it's really difficult to pull kids out. I agree with Eric. That ain't going to happen if they don't play really well defensively this year. And right now, nobody knows what they're going to do defensively. Nobody, right? Including the coaches. Coaches have no idea. Nobody knows. So we'll see what comes of it. I think we can draw a few conclusions. One is, it's not necessarily true to say that everything that happens is a result of NIL. Money matters in college football today. We know that. It's important. It's important, just like it's important in your job. But most people that you talk to, they didn't have one and only one consideration in mind when picking a job. That's not the way it usually works. There are all kinds of things that go into that. Where you're comfortable, how close it is to your home, what's good for your family, and all kinds of reasons. It's true with kids too. There are all kinds of reasons. It's not just NIL, although NIL is important, just like salary at your place is important. Number two, I think we can probably agree that right now where USC recruiting is not necessarily where Lincoln Riley wanted it to be. I feel pretty safe saying that. And Mark mentioned that there seems to be some lethargy. Well, you know, recruiting has momentum and you know, reverse momentum, and USC suffered some reverse momentum last week, which makes it difficult, one, to get excited about the other guys, Jakeem Stewart and people like that, who may very well be prospects USC can land, but it makes it difficult to get too excited about. And look, don't get too excited about it. If you're a USC fan, don't get too high emotionally or low emotionally based on what some kid does in his recruiting right now. Your life shouldn't change based on even what class is signed, much less what one kid says. And I say that all to bring up my last point on this, which is stop being crazy, people.
Thank you.
Here's the thing. We've been doing this show for the last, 3 years now, maybe? Something like that. All of us have been writing on WeAreSC or other places for some years before that. And one thing that you get used to when you start putting content out there is that you have two responses. Anytime you're critical about anything, you have two responses to it. One is you have the people that immediately jump in and say, yes, that's what I've been saying. I agree with Chris. We should fire Lincoln Riley right now, which is not at all what I've been saying or believe. And then you have other people that as soon as you say something critical, they automatically jump in with well, if you were a true fan, look, people, we're true fans on this show. I promise you. I wouldn't spend this much time talking about USC football. I wouldn't have been to every home game during the Paul Hackett tenure if I wasn't a real football fan, a USC fan. So there's a lot going on that we don't know. We have not gotten the public commitments that I think the USC coaching staff wanted. I think there are a lot of players out there who are waiting to see what happens with this defense, which I think will play actually pretty well this year. But if they don't, this recruiting class could be a giant crater, a smoking crater. And that's not great. Did I miss anything with that, guys? I started talking much too long, but I do that.
No, I think Smoking Crater covered it. I nailed it. Well done.
Yeah, I mean, whereas if they play well, who knows? I mean, if they play well, you could easily see this being a top 5 class, which is what I predicted a top 5 class for some time. I still think there's a chance, but they're going to have to play well. And at this point, there are a lot of people, high school coaches, parents of recruits who look at USC right now and say, yeah, let's see. And that's not an outrageous thing to say about USC football, especially about USC's defense right now, right? I mean, I think you can feel pretty comfortable that Ohio State is going to play pretty good defense. I think you can feel pretty comfortable that Georgia is going to play good defense. If you feel comfortable that USC is going to play good defense, it's because you really want that to happen and you've convinced yourself. Otherwise, you just don't know. We just don't know. We don't know anything.
But they're in on the right guys, right? It's a giant box. Like of all the boxes to check, that's the biggest one. But if you can put a check mark in that box, that helps you a lot with a lot of really talented players that you've built these relationships with, that have been out to USC, that have a great connection with the coaching staff. And so you're for a program where every single person out there not connected to USC will say they're not going to play defense, you shouldn't go there, you shouldn't go there. USC's done a pretty good job of getting in the game with a lot of these guys. Now you have to show some proof to them. You can't talk about, oh, hey, it's going to look like this, we're going to be like this. You got to do it. You got to do it.
Yeah, and it's not only, look, recruiting is a long-term deal, but it's even longer than you ordinarily think about, because it's not just these guys. I mean, if you're going into some of these hotbeds of recruiting in Georgia, Florida, Texas, places like that, one, you need to build relationships with those coaching staffs. You need to do that. And two, it's good for you. If a superstar recruit comes to USC, they have a great time. They talk about how great it is. They go back home and talk about how great it was. Even if they choose the local school, that's not bad. That's the sort of PR that you need if you're going to be landing these guys over time. So Having these guys come in is important. Eric's right. The right guys are visiting. They are. The question is whether you can land them and whether in the pursuit of those guys, some of the other guys that are naturally in your box fall into someone else's box.
Well, look, we have the right guys visiting unofficially. When it came time to put, and put pen to paper, so to speak, for the official visit, and I'm talking about Isaiah Gibson and Justice Terry, they unchecked the box. The boxes that need to be checked more thoroughly are the guys in your backyard. I think that's where a lot of the frustration from the Trojan fans that follow recruiting, where it's coming from. They see those guys going elsewhere, especially after they've been committed to USC. And look, I think Coach Riley is trying to rectify the mistake of holding on to Alex Grinch for a year too long. And that's what he's up against right now this year in the state of California. So yeah, you're generating interest across the country because you went out and hired Danton Lynn and Eric Henderson and Matt Enns and Doug Belk. Fantastic. Bringing him out, paying for them to come out for an unofficial visit, because everyone's doing that now. Great. They committed there, but you weren't able to keep them committed when it was time to say, all right, now you know what? It's official. Come on out here. Let's talk to the professors. Let's show you this. Let's show you the campus. Let's see how serious you are. We haven't cleared that hurdle yet.
Yeah. Well, and look, in fairness, there is no Justice Terry in USC's backyard. No. Right? That guy doesn't exist. And so when I agree with you, Mark, is the argument that I've been making, is that USC needs to do a better job of focusing on the homegrown talent. There is no Justice Terry. There is no Joaquin Stewart in Los Angeles. Those guys don't exist in LA, at least this year. And so there are some positions where you're going to have to go out of state. My issue is not that they're recruiting Justice Terry. It's about practice not to recruit Justice Terry. Everybody's recruiting Justice Terry. My issue is where USC does have promising prospects in its backyard, and it is possibly slow playing those guys or possibly letting them believe that they are second choice. That's the sort of thing that can go back to bite you. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Lincoln Riley's not making that error. But I think the people who are concerned about USC's hometown recruiting, that's what they're concerned about. They're concerned about these linebacker recruits who we don't know what's going to happen. They're concerned about five-star corner recruits that are looking elsewhere and saying, these are guys you have to lock down. Yes, go to Georgia and try to pull a Justice Terry out, knowing that it's unlikely. But you can't lose these homegrown guys, so you can look for a slightly better guy at a place that is much harder to land and recruit. That's the issue. And we may be wrong about that. Lincoln Riley may be on top of this, and he may clean up in Southern California. It's just we haven't been cleaning up in Southern California for some years now.
Eric, what's your opinion on this? Mater Dei, Centennial, Bosco, they have their open houses where they invite, coaches out from all over the country. USC doesn't go to those events, particularly the Mater Dei and the Bosco ones. And we're starting to see, that Mater Dei pipeline kind of dry up a little bit. Whether or not USC has the ability to go visit any of those campuses on any given day by themselves, I think that's beside the point. But the message that's out there is they don't care about us as much as they care about the guys in Georgia and Alabama and Oklahoma and Texas. Well, it seems to be the emphasis of their recruiting. I mean, you got to be able to balance that out. Even if you're not going to be serious on those open house days, send somebody. Show that you at least you kind of care.
Yeah, I mean, every good player, not every, far more than there should be, good players in Southern California are growing up with Oregon as their school. As Oregon as the cool winning school, that's the place I want to go. USC needs to do better at, again, it's winning games. That is ultimately it, but better at kind of branding themselves all over as no, that's the school that you want to grow, that you grow up wanting to go to. It's been that before. I mean, we saw, during Pete's run, even when Lane and Sark were here, it was, other schools had to go beat USC. USC now has to beat other programs for players here. And you can talk about Mater Dei and Bosco and some of these like machines that are rolling guys out, and their success rate going to these other schools is not phenomenal. They're not sending out guys where they have 100% success rate and every single guy that goes out of that school has success. But USC needs to get itself to where they are the ones who are saying, no, we don't really want that guy. We don't want that guy. Instead of like hoping that when a Dijon Lee comes out, and if there's a guy that you really want, like you can put yourself at the top for him and out recruit these other schools that he's been looking at, for years now. And so I think that's the change. Because again, the idea of, oh, that guy went to Mater Dei and there's six pretty good players at Mater Dei, USC should take all six. No, no, you can't do that. But when there's one, you got to make sure that that guy grew up saying, I only want to go to USC. That's the school that I want to go to. Again, that is a year over year, potentially a 5 year, a decade long kind of solution that you need to come up with. And again, Lincoln Riley's right when he says, like, when we took it over, it was not in a healthy spot in terms of that. But there are things that they could have done going into now year three that would have set themselves up better, I think, in terms of that.
Yeah, and look, here's the thing. Most coaches that are going to be really, really good at a school, by year three, their program has shown signs of that, right? I mean, Pete Carroll, national title year three, Orange Bowl victory year two. But it's not just at USC. You saw it with Nick Saban and Urban Meyer. You saw it with Lou Holtz. You saw it with just about every coach who became, a legendary coach. Year two or three, that program is off and running. And maybe USC will too, right? Maybe USC wins 10 games this year and really plays exceptionally well, and that changes the nature of everything. But if in year three you limp to an 8-4 finish, that is reason to doubt. It is. You look at what Pete Carroll did in 3 years without the transfer portal. He didn't have the benefit of that. You look at what Pete Carroll did in 3 years, and you saw a remarkable turnaround from the worst coach in USC football history and a last place finish in the Pac-10 to what was the best program in the country and will continue to be the best program in the country for the next 3-4 years, right? That's what you expect from Lincoln Riley when you pay him $12 million. The program's not where it was supposed to be. I'm not giving up on the season. I'm not. It doesn't make any sense. We'll see how they play, right? I mean, they may win a lot of games. Just saying that it's not crazy for these high school kids to look at it and say, okay, I don't know whether you're going to play defense because I haven't seen that from you before, Lincoln. And this isn't where I would have expected USC to be in year three of a legendary coach's tenure.
Yeah.
It's not where I would have expected him to be. I don't think it's where Lincoln Riley expected him to be.
Lincoln Riley needs his Sean Cody in this class or something of that ilk, where you're thinking, all right, I got one of those top guys to stay home, to trust me, who believed in the vision. And then all of a sudden, you find the Mike Pattersons and the Omar Nazels that kind of fit in around that. It just takes one. And right now, he's still waiting for that one. That was what got Pete Carroll going. He kept Sean Cody at home. Well, Coach O did, but it was a combination of almost that perfect storm.
It's also the case that Pete Carroll could sell snow to Eskimos, and we shouldn't forget that sometimes there's just good old-fashioned retail salesmanship. That's an important part of recruiting. I'm not saying that Lincoln Riley's not good at that. I actually don't know one way or the other whether he's good at that. But there are coaches that are fantastic at that. There are guys that are just hard to say no to. Pete Carroll was a guy that was hard to say no to. And that was true before Pete Carroll had the best program in football. He was hard to say no to early on. He was hard to say no to when he got the 4 of the Poly 5 to sign on. When USC had been a mess for years before that. So that's part of it too. And I think you see some of that with, Ed Orgeron was that way. It looks like Coach Hinney's that way. it's possible to say no to him, as we've seen. But he does look like a guy who really makes an impression on recruits. But there's that part of it too. It's not just location, it's not just money. Some guys are better at selling their program and selling their university than others are. And those guys tend to be really solid recruiters. Some of them aren't very good coaches, right? There are a lot of guys that recruit really well and can't win. But it's hard to win when you don't recruit well. So anyway, we may be beating this horse. Is there anybody want to land a final blow? All right. Let's go on to number 2. So we started this a couple of weeks ago. We skipped it last week. We were going to go through the various position groups on the USC football team for this coming season. And we talked about quarterbacks first. This week, we're moving on to another offensive position group, offensive line, which I think if you were to poll people who really know USC football, including the people on this show today, this is the season, right? I mean, how this group does determines whether USC is successful this year or not. The defensive line isn't where they want it to be. The defense is going to play better. USC will play competent defense this year, probably not elite, competent defense. The question is whether a competent defense is going to be enough. It usually is for Lincoln Riley teams. But the question is whether this year a competent defense alone will be enough and USC's offense will overpower opponents, as Lincoln Riley's teams usually do. And when you ask that question, it tends to get back to this position group. Is the offensive line going to be any good? All right, Eric, you get to start us off. Is the offensive line going to be any good? Let's talk about this position group today.
Yeah, Eric, are they going to be good?
Is this a yes? Is this a yes or no question
I
that we have to go
assume
with?
your answer is going to be longer than one word. You could start yes or no if you wanted to.
Maybe I could make it one word. Maybe,
Okay.
maybe is my answer. So it's again a little bit how we talked about last year. Like if the pieces fit and if nobody really gets hurt, I think it could be okay. Last year the pieces didn't fit and a couple people got hurt and there were definitely some struggles. I think it's one of those things. So look, we like Justin Deitch and everything that he had done for the program, the way he fit in. I think if you ask him seriously, did you play as well as you anticipated playing at center? I think he would give you a no, right? It wasn't up to what we kind of expected. I don't think it was up to what Lincoln Riley, Josh Henson, anybody expected at center. And if you struggle right up the middle, that makes it really tough on your offense, your quarterback, all your offensive linemen. If Jonah Monheim is the answer at center, that answers some of those questions. And at least Miller Moss is not taking the snap and seeing two face masks bearing down on him and throwing their arms up. So from what we've heard, Jonah Monheim seems like he's going to be great at center. I mean, he's been excellent kind of anywhere that he's played. Again, the answer, if you've got an answer at center, that's an okay place to start. And then if you go to left tackle next, again, from what you've heard, people talk about Elijah Page. We saw a little bit of him in the Holiday Bowl. If those two spots are good, you can kind of piece things in. Now, piecing things in means you need gigantic steps forward at those other three spots from guys who had some flashes last year. Emmanuel Prignon at left guard, Alani Noah's got to take a step forward. At right guard, again, he's a guy where like the minute he stepped on campus, players, coaches were like, this is a guy. And then struggled as a true freshman trying to play right away. Is that the first time that's ever happened? No. So again, if he could kind of figure that out and lock in at right guard, you feel good there. Going into the transfer portal, the only thing you knew was that USC was going to sign a starter at right tackle. That was it. I mean, they were going to get a starter in the interior of the defensive line, and they were going to get a starter at right tackle. That didn't happen at right tackle. Again, it shifted a little bit towards, hey, Mason Murphy had a great spring. We really like that. Okay, right? So we'll see there. Again, consistency's always been like the buzzword that you've heard about him. You've got Gino Quinones, who's coming back, who could probably play all three of those interior spots. And that's your line, right? There's some second year guys who maybe can take a step and provide something, but you're still back at you shifted some guys around. So boy, I hope those pieces fit, and boy, I hope nobody gets hurt. Lincoln Riley talks about we're bigger. We think we can move people a little bit more. I hope so, because Lincoln Riley's offenses that win games and are dominant, there's a real run game piece of that he can rely on there. And so they need to be able to do that. So that is a gigantically long-winded way of saying maybe.
You want to be gigantically long-winded too, Mark? I hope so.
I'll play the jackass role, right, Eric? I'll be the mule. So Eric actually gave the answer. I'll just give it a little bit more simplistic version of it. As long as Jonah Monheim is not playing either one of the tackle spots, that means USC's offensive line is probably good at the bookends. If Jonah can stay at center and Elijah Page has secured that left tackle spot and Mason Murphy's like, all right, you know what? It's finally mine. I'm right tackle. We're going to be okay on the offensive line. With that said, you know, if anybody gets injured, you immediately go to the youth movement. So that's why Gino becomes such a valuable commodity, because he can play left guard, center, or right guard. And I'm sure in a pinch, he could probably play a tackle spot as well, even though he's not designed to play tackle. So what Eric said is correct. As long as Jonah stays at center for all 12 regular season games, USC should be fine. If you're moving him to tackle, you got issues.
Yeah, I think you can make an argument that USC will be okay at all five positions, right? You can make an argument. The problem is if there's a, 50, 60, 70% chance that they'll be solid at each of those positions, well, if you're a statistician, you start multiplying those percentages together and you realize, okay, well, the odds are long that the offensive line is going to be a strength. Here's the thing, though. USC doesn't have a single position where they're set, not one. I think Monheim's going to be really good at center. I'm actually not worried about that. He hasn't proven it yet, but I think he's going to be, and that's a huge benefit. I mean, I think you guys are right. You look at center, you look at left tackle. If you're solid there, then you're feeling pretty good about the two spots that are hardest to fill. I think he'll be solid. I think that Elijah Page is going to be solid. We don't know. Again, he hasn't proven it. He has elite talent. The coaches seem excited about him. And most players, especially the ones who get some time as freshmen, make huge jumps between their freshman and sophomore years. He'll probably be solid. You can make an argument that Pragnon is going to be solid too. That is a big guy with a lot of talent who played better as the year went on. He was never a world beater last year. He wasn't. But he played better as the year went on. A jump there wouldn't be a huge surprise. A jump by Alani Noah wouldn't be a huge surprise. Again, the fact that he struggled a little bit playing as a true freshman doesn't mean that he's not going to be substantially better as a sophomore. In fact, I'm almost certain he's going to be. And Mason Murphy, the coaches say that they were pleased with how he played during the spring. That's fine. He played pretty well in the spring game, I thought. But what else are they going to say when they don't land a right tackle in the portal? They're not going to tell everybody, well, our plans are dead. We can't win now. I mean, so of course they're going to say that. I don't know what to make of it. You can make an argument for all of this. You need those guys to stay healthy and play well, because other than Quinones, you don't really have much experience behind him. You got a whole bunch of freshmen and redshirt freshmen and guys that you can't trust to step in and play. Doesn't mean they can't do it, but you can't trust them to right now. The best case scenario here, you think about Pete Carroll's second offensive line at USC. USC had been lousy up front for years before that season. USC played pretty good defense, especially the second half of Pete Carroll's first year. They played pretty good defense. but the offensive line struggled a lot that season. But he couldn't run the ball for a yard against Utah in a bowl game. They struggled. They struggled under Paul Hackett pretty
Do you remember who the
consistently.
running back was? Chris, who was the running back in the Las Vegas Bowl? Do you remember his name?
Was it Sonny Bird still?
It was Sonny Bird.
Yeah. Yeah, and Sonny Bird was he was a great Trojan, a hardworking guy. He was it was a great story. Sonny would probably admit he's not the most talented back USC's ever had, but the offensive line struggled the last 2 years of John Robinson's tenure. It struggled for a long time. There were a lot of question marks, and that offensive line really gelled as the year went on and became dominant. And from unexpected places, right? John Drake comes from the junior college level. The only thing you know about John Drake is that he's big, and John Drake turns into a masher. So I don't know what's going to happen. You can't feel great about it, right? I mean, you don't take the mortgage payment and run down to Vegas and put a bet on USC having the best offensive line in the country. That would not be wise. But if these guys can be competent, I think with Lincoln Riley calling the shots, I think you have two quarterbacks who can get it done. You have a ton of skill position guys that can really play. If the offensive line can be competent, that group could be really good. But I don't think anybody in the world knows whether that offensive line is going to be competent yet. So,
And I do think Josh Henson talks a lot about not losing quickly, right? Miller Moss, he got the ball out pretty quickly in that Holiday Bowl. If you can just stand in front, right? If you're not lunging and missing and leaving just an absolute direct path to him, I think you're going to be okay. Just get hands on somebody and make the wall inside. Make them go all the way wide to beat you consistently. And I think you're going to be okay. Again, it's USC. If we flash forward in 2 years and 3 years, and we're still talking about, yeah, I think you can be okay. No. You need to get to a point where you're talking about being an elite team because your offensive line is one of the 5 best in the country, at least one of the 10 best in the country. You got to get to that point. Right now, you're not there. You're still building. There is a lot of youth. I think that's going to be one of the interesting things too, is 6 weeks in, 5 weeks in, who do you start hearing about of those young guys? Hey, this guy's really turning it on. And we think maybe in the bowl game, right, we could see him maybe late in the year. He's the guy that can play, because you need 2 or 3 of those guys this year to start really turning it up a little bit.
yeah, and don't forget, I remember after that first Pete Carroll year that Norm Chow had a quote in the newspaper, something about, there are things you can do to help a young struggling offensive line. And USC is going to have to do some of those things. USC is going to have to get rid of the ball quickly. They're going to have to be a better screen and draw team than USC's been in some years. They're going to have to be better at misdirection than I think USC sometimes wants to be. USC likes to think they can just line up and do their thing, and the best USC teams can. I don't know if this is a just line up and we'll do our thing. We don't care if they know it's coming team from USC. So Lincoln Riley has an entire offseason where he's looking at his offensive line and saying, okay, we've got some question marks here. I'm going to have to do some things to slow down the pass rush. I'm going to have to do some things to create some time to throw to my talented receivers. And if you are one of the best offensive coordinators in college football, then you need to be able to come up with some ways to do that, right? You need to be able to confuse LSU. You need to be able to run some misdirection. You need to get the ball into Zachariah Branch's hands one-on-one quickly so he can make somebody miss and go 50, right? You have to be able to do those things. Lincoln Riley is expected to be able to do those things. That he's an elite offensive mind for a reason. So he's going to have to do that. He's going to have to protect his O-line a little bit, especially early, I suspect. Mark, you wanted to say something?
I was going to say the biggest difference, the biggest change that Coach Carroll made from year 1 to year 2 was he took the autonomy away from Norm Chow on the offense. He said, you know what? I left you alone for a year. We allowed you to, bring Keith Press on as your offensive line coach. He got rid of Keith, and it was the next year when the offensive line changed. It became more balanced. You had a little bit more run mixed in with a pass. That was the biggest difference. I don't think the issue is what USC's been recruiting. For the last 2 classes, they've brought in 10 plus guys in the offensive line, big guys. So now it's a matter of, are you developing them the right way? Are we using them to their best of their abilities? Because to me, that was the biggest difference between year one and year two with Pete Carroll.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Look, Pete got serious about running the ball off tackle and picking up 4 yards. You remember Tim Davis with the God wants 4 yards. And so I think Lincoln is probably looking at this unit saying, I've got some real mass, especially inside. We need to be able to move some people and run the ball. And he's going to have to make a commitment to that, because I think with USC's question marks at tackle, again, I think Page will be good. I don't know about Murphy. Nobody knows yet. But I think with a question marks at tackle, you cannot be in many 3rd and 10s. And Caleb Williams could survive being 3rd and 10. In fact, he was in 3rd and 10 a ton, but he could survive it because he could run around and make things happen. Miller Moss is not going to survive a whole series of 3rd and 10s against Michigan and Penn State and Notre Dame, or probably anybody else. So they're going to have to have success running the ball right at people. And if they can't do that, then I think the offense is probably in trouble. But they've got some big bodies. They have some backs that I like a lot. We'll see. Seems like the sort of thing you might be able to do. Maybe. All right, fellas. Let's move on. We had started before. We ran a few different weeks where we were talking about past Big Ten USC matchups as we get ready for this inaugural USC and the Big Ten season. Let's do it again. Let's talk about some old USC Big Ten matchups that we remembered and enjoyed. Or you can share one you didn't enjoy, I guess, if that's what you want to be. Okay. Eric, why don't you start us off? I think Mark is still researching, trying to come up with one.
I never thought about the idea of both of us coming up with really bad USC losses for this, just to set your mood correctly for the 10 questions at the end of this thing. That might be interesting for one week. I'm gonna go 2008 Rose Bowl, USC Illinois. Another kind of in a list of where Big Ten teams thought, oh no, we're gonna be the one, right? We're gonna be the one to get them. We got this USC program. We've got offense, all that stuff, and 49-17. That one you've got the Garrett Green to Desmond Reed trick play touchdown with the flip into the end zone. You've got the late Herschel Dennis run where the whole team kind of like hauls him in, and then there's a celebration there. Ray Maluga was everywhere. Kerry Harris had a pick. Terrell Thomas ripped a fumble out. Just kind of that kind of setting the tone, right, for what the defense did the next year. Another Rose Bowl win, 600 something yards total, I think was a record at the time. I think the 49 points was a record at the time for the Rose Bowl. Yeah, remembering Rose Bowl wins like that. It's fun. It's fun to go back and take a look at those things.
You remember how bored USC fans were with the Rose Bowl at that point in time? All the complaint, another Rose Bowl. This is terrible. Yeah, I mean, it was awful winning the Pac-12 every single year and then killing a Big Ten team. That was awful. Mark, what do you got? Did you come up with something, or do you need more time?
I'm guilty of saying a 3rd Rose Bowl in a row. Really, is this what we got to do?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was in that land. So yeah, Chris, you actually helped me out with this one. I had to go back all the way to 1991, and I had to come back from that game where the USC lost at home to Memphis State. Remember that? And then they went on the road.
And I do in fact remember that. I didn't get to go to that game. I was actually in football camp. That was my freshman year of college, and I was listening to the game on the radio, just horrified that USC was going to lose at home to Memphis State. I thought, how bad can this season possibly get? The answer was very bad, but not the next week.
No, the next week they fly out to New Jersey, the Meadowlands, I think is where the game was. And they took the number 5 team and turned them upside down. Penn State the week before beat Cincinnati 81-0. So USC loses at home to a team called Memphis State that they literally had no respect for, and it showed the way they played. Go fly back east, take Joe Paterno behind the woodshed, And everyone's saying, all right, well, USC is going to bounce back. No, that was their best one of the year.
Well, that was it. They were done after that. By the way,
Was
was
it?
that the Meadowlands? That may have been at the Coliseum, that Penn State game. But
Was
in
it?
any event, you're right.
I thought they beat Penn State the year before at the Coliseum. Regardless,
That was the most unlikely beatdown of a Penn State team that USC's probably ever had. So yeah, good one. Although it brings back a really, I mean, you going back to 1991, Mark. That's
crappy
tough,
year.
man. That's
3-8,
tough.
3-8.
McKinney doesn't even know. He wouldn't even remember 1991. He wasn't even born. He was born in, I think, 93. All right, I've got one, and this is one that took place just before I was born. It's the 1973 Rose Bowl, but I'm doing it because if Greg was here, we definitely would have heard about this game by now, and so I'm trying to do my part as a proper host. And two, this was the greatest USC team of all time, probably. Maybe the greatest college football team of all time, if Keith Jackson is right. So this is after the 1972 regular season. USC is 11-0. They really hadn't played a close game all year. This was an absolute monster of a team. They're playing a one-loss Ohio State team in the Rose Bowl. John McKay versus Woody Hayes. And at halftime, it's 7-7. And then USC just opens up a giant can in the second half and just destroys Ohio State, with Sam Bam Cunningham having 4 rushing touchdowns in the second half. And the last one, according to Sam Bam himself, Cunningham was already on the bench. USC's up 35-17, I believe, at this point, and it's late in the game. He grabs Sam Bam off the bench, walks, according to Cunningham himself, 3 steps onto the field with grabbing Sam Bam's jersey, looks over to Woody Hayes, gets his attention, and then does this to let him know that Cunningham's going over the top for the 4th touchdown. And Sam Bam says that the hole was so big that he actually didn't have to jump, but he went ahead and jumped over the top just because that's what McKay wanted him to do. 42-17 final, maybe the greatest USC team of all time, destroys Woody Hayes in the Rose Bowl, and that's a good time. I'm sorry I missed that one live.
Me too.
You remember that game, Mark?
No, I was 6 years old. I wish I was there though.
You're almost old enough, almost. All right, I was born in 73. I missed that.
1 year later is when USC became part of my DNA. That's when I caught Ricky Bell doing what Ricky Bell does best. I was like, ooh, that's for me.
Yeah. All right. Last one. I don't know if we need to spend a lot of time on it, but the Division I Council was supposed to vote today on essentially an unlimited college football coaching staff. There's been a lot of talk about, I think Lincoln Riley actually said, if they're going to expand the coaching staff, maybe he will have a full-time special teams coach. That may be in the works. It sounds like there's a possibility that may be approved. What do you think about this, guys? Or do you?
I could care less. I could not care any less. Unless they are going to allow every single person on USC staff to go out and hit the road for recruiting, none of this really matters, because all this stuff, nobody's watching this stuff behind the scenes anyways. You even have your analysts that are already on the staff that are helping with tactical stuff. So just
this would allow those guys to actually coach on the field.
That's why they should do this, right? That's why they should just get rid of having everyone police themselves, and what's the gray line between an analyst and a quality control guy and all of that. Who can coach on the field, who can coach off the field. I suppose you open yourself up to some school hires 500 assistant coaches, and that's the whole pool for everybody, and nobody else has a coach. But I do think the number right now, because you do have, right, some schools want to do inside outside receiver coach, some schools want to do like a defensive tackle and a defensive ends coach, some schools want to do interior offensive line and tackles. So I do think there is something to you bump those numbers up a little bit in terms of on-field assistance that you can have. But again, trying to set it to a number is okay. So you can have 15. All right. So now we've got 15 coaches plus all these quality control assistants that are all kind of right on the line of doing this stuff. So it sort of becomes why have a specific number, or you cap it at you can have 40 guys at all involved, anywhere in the program, and that's it. Again, it's going to be NIL, right? It's college football. It's in their DNA. Show me a rule, and I will spend however long it takes coming up with a way to get around that rule and find loopholes and work around it. So for me, it's just when this thing all gets redone into whatever structure it is, you ultimately want to have like one rule or two rules. I mean, as few as possible, because there's always going to be ways around them.
Yeah, it seems to me there are two things that jump out at me. One is that this shows once again this split between the really big football schools and then the Division I schools that struggle with money. USC and Alabama are not worried about people being able to hire more assistant coaches. They are not. They can hire more assistant coaches. That's not a problem. But if you're Bowling Green, I don't want to pick on Bowling Green, but if you're Bowling Green, it probably is an issue, right? If you have to hire 3, 4, 5 new assistants, that may actually impact your budget.
Well, their assistants are going to be the ones that are getting plucked by the USCs and the
Well,
Alabama.
that's true. That's true too. Although maybe not. Here's my dream scenario, and this makes my dream scenario possible. I've been begging them to hire Pete Carroll as some sort of analyst, right? I seriously doubt this is going to happen, but just hear me out. I don't think Pete's going to come back so he can be a defensive backs coach and grind 70 hours a week during the season. I think that his career has moved past that stage. But if you could hire a Pete Carroll or an Ed Orgeron as an analyst, let them do what they want to do, but also be able to go down on the field and give some instruction during practice or even during the game. Would I want that to happen? Yes, I would. I would very much want that to happen. This allows you some flexibility on having some of these unusual relationships. You could imagine a Bob Stoops at Oklahoma, maybe coming back to do a little bit, but being able to coach on field. Right now, you have limitations on who can coach on field. So I don't think that's going to happen. But if they bring Pete back and Pete gets to be on the field saying anything to anybody, that will make me a very happy camper.
I say do it the way what the retail what retail does. Bring him in for seasonal help. Coach O, Coach Pete, you come in during recruiting season, get to work, and you can have the rest of the year off.
Yeah, look, having Pete and O tag team with Coach Henney at one of these June recruiting weekends wouldn't be a terrible thing. But okay. All right, you guys ready? It's time to play the game. We've been going on too long. We've got nothing new to say. Arledge's 10 questions. Look, Mark, there's some pressure on you right now, and on me. There's some pressure on you because you're on a losing streak. There's pressure on me because everybody always blames me for your losing streaks. And I don't understand why that is.
You're the Pac-12 referee, Chris.
I am. I may not even be that good. The Pac-12 referees were biased and incompetent, but they pretended to be otherwise. I don't even pretend to be otherwise. I am, in fact, biased and incompetent. Okay, here we go. You ready? McKinney, are you ready? Are you confident, Eric? You look confident.
I'm almost never confident.
Okay. Well, I am rooting for Mark just to get the heat off of my back, but we'll see what happens. He still has to perform. All right.
I gotta say, I'm rooting for Mark too. So I'm glad we're all on the same page here.
Well, that's good.
Both of you can take your pity and just take it to the other sideline.
Okay, that's what I'll do. I mean, look, usually Mark is rooting for you. Usually he's conceding points, conceding games. That's what he's doing. But I saw a little bit of fire from him right there. So maybe we'll get a real performance from him for the first time in a month. All right, question number 1. Best cornerback duo in USC history. I think there are only 2 options here that really make sense, but we'll see what you guys got. Mark, start us off.
Well, I'm going back to 1977, and I believe Ronnie Lott was a freshman that year, and he played cornerback. And I think on the other side of the field, Jeff Fisher was also playing cornerback. So that's my selection.
Those are two good names. I'll take Ronnie Lott and anybody at any position. I don't care. Just Ronnie Lott. That's all I need to know.
Back then, when he was
Yeah.
a freshman, Pete Jackson called him a young Ron Lott. He hadn't gotten the name Ronnie yet.
He hadn't earned it yet? Well, he's earned it now. McKinney, do you have something better than Ronnie Lott?
No, right? No. I mean, that's cheating, right? It's always that. You go back and do the USC all-time team, and it's like if you draft anybody, you take cornerback Ronnie Lott because there's nobody else, and you get him on your team, and you get to pretend like he played corner his entire career. And so Mark's cheating by taking Ronnie Lott because
Not cheating.
yeah, that's
Mark's
right.
being very aggressive at the line of scrimmage right now.
Yeah, 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 I am. I mean, yes. So yeah, that's the answer. I mean, I feel like at WeAreSC we can settle on that he's a safety when in those kind of discussions. But again, I know he played corner. I know he played corner,
He
and I
played
know
corner
that
even
that's
in the NFL some.
I know, and I know that that's one of the two answers you did. Um, so because Ronnie Lott's going to win your point, I'm going to go much more recent than that. So I could go Adoree Jackson and anybody else, but the 2007 Kerry Harris, Terrell Thomas was always one of those duos where you just felt super confident. They were not going to screw anything up. They were going to make every tackle. They were going to come up with a forced fumble or an interception every once in a while.
See, Eric, you might have been able to steal a point if you would have come up with a Porn Harris story.
No, I'm not. You said Ronnie Lott. He's giving you the point. If you say Ronnie Lott or Pete Carroll, you get a point. I mean, look,
That's true.
Chris,
No, that's true.
we haven't cracked. I don't want to admit that we've cracked your code, but we got it a little bit.
I mean, that one wasn't all that difficult. That's not behind a really good. That's like the password is 1, 2, 3, 4 for that one. Yeah, look, I think just because they should be mentioned, I think Dalen McCutcheon and Brian Kelly should get a mention. A really fantastic pair from the end of the John Robinson era, maybe bled over into Paul Hackett. But, you know, when Florida State came to USC in 96, I think, 96, maybe 97, I can't remember. At that time, Florida State was the elite program in the country. They were on top of the world. And USC came out in that game and lined up in man coverage and just dared them to beat them and almost won the game. In fact, Brian Kelly dropped what would have been a pick six if they had won the game. And it would have been a gigantic upset. Two excellent corners. But you're right. The answer is Ronnie Lott and whoever played with Ronnie Lott. Mark Hawkins up 1-0. I gave him that question because I needed him to get out of the box strong. I needed that. All right, number 2. What should USC do with Zachariah Branch that they didn't do enough of last year? Eric?
I think that they need to bring him out of the backfield more and go more motion with him a little bit. But honestly, the answer is go into the game knowing we are putting the ball in your hands 10 times on offense and force some stuff to him a little bit. I know everyone, throw it to who's open, throw it to whatever, run the offense. Get a chunk of plays where he touches the ball and that's all that happens on that play.
Well, Mark?
Whomever is in charge of trick plays needs to have one per game with Zachariah Branch's name written on the list. I did not see enough end arounds. I did not see enough Zachariah Branch taking the end around and maybe throwing it downfield. Anything that makes the defense go, oh, crap. I want those 2 words being spoken every time he touches the ball. Oh, crap.
Yeah, the thing with Branch is that when you move him around, the defense has to adjust to that, and they have to figure out what to do. If you just line him up in the slot and have him do what slot receivers do, he's still dangerous, but it's not the same thing. lining him up at running back and then moving him out, line him up running back and hand him the ball. They did that against Notre Dame. He went for like 35 or 40. Move him around. Look, if you want to be able to run the ball with the running back, running a couple of fly sweeps to Branch and then running the fake fly sweep is not a terrible way to do it, right? Mark mentioned the end around. Run the end around and then fake it and run a sweep the other way. Look, you have a guy like that. Every defensive coordinator is going to come into that game telling his guys, you have to know where he is. We cannot let him be by himself in space. You can't, because he is super dangerous. So they just need to be more creative. I was disappointed last year that they weren't more creative with him. Now, maybe that's because he was a true freshman. Maybe it's because he got dinged up halfway through the year, right? There are some good reasons why it may have happened. There are no good reasons this year for not being more creative with Zachariah Branch. That guy is different. He has to get the ball in space. He has to. I mean, this is a guy where if you throw him a 5-yard hitch and you're man to man, there is a 25 to 50% chance that he's going to break that tackle and be off to the races, right? He's a problem. You've got to use him more. I suppose the other thing we could do is block for him on kickoff, but I don't want to.
Without, yeah, you said with him, not for him. For him, yes. Block a guy who's coming downfield.
It was so frustrating. You know, he started off on fire as a return man, and he's a great return man. It got so frustrating to watch teams kick it high and short and USC not block over and over and over and over again. And I don't know who is responsible for that special team, but if it's a coach that's still on staff, I'm furious with that coach right now. And I'll never stop being furious with them. Come on, get your act together, guys. All right. Both of you get a point. Both answers were right. Question number 3. Worst career decision. Apollo Creed taking on a no-name challenger named Rocky Balboa, or Rocky giving Paulie access to all his money? Mark, which is the worst career decision?
You never give anybody access to your money. Period. End of story.
Not even Paulie? He seemed like a safe bet.
Period. End of story. Shohei Ohtani right now is throwing his interpreter under the bus because he gave him access to his money, allegedly.
Yeah, and he used it wisely. McKinney, do you agree with that? Do you think that the Paulie decision was the bad one?
I do, and what I think Mark is saying is that the better decision is to not schedule tough opponents, right? To set your schedule with the Alliance Athletic Club to kick off your season. That's an okay thing to do as long as you hold on to your money.
Well, here's the thing, though. I mean, Rocky could make more money, right? He could. You don't want to lose it all. That's not good. But he could make more money. Remember, here's the thing. Rocky didn't care about money. This is the guy who took no money for the Ivan Drago fight, the biggest heavyweight championship fight of all time, and he lets the Soviets keep all the money. That's what Rocky did. Rocky doesn't care about money. Now, Apollo Creed probably does care about his own life, and you can make an argument that Apollo Creed's death at the hands of Ivan started when he took on Rocky Balboa, right? I mean, he ends up losing his title. He goes in a funk. He's upset because nobody thinks of him as the greatest champion of all time. He has to come fight a Russian when he's way over the hill, and he dies. So I think the right answer is Creed, because Creed died from that. Rocky was still happy. He had his restaurant. He would take a flower to Adrian. Didn't matter. He doesn't need money. He just needs that ball he can bounce and one of those hats he likes to wear. That's all he needs. You both lose a point. It's 1-0. All right. Question number 4. Look, how many college football shows do you have where you get content like that, right? I mean, this is why I'm sure we're going to get to 80 or 100,000 views this week. All right, you have to give up one tradition this year. Tusk, Traveler, or the Song Girls. You got to give up one. What's it going to be? Mark Holken, go.
Oh, man. You know what? Because I'm up in the press box and they're so far away that I don't even really get to enjoy their entertainment, I got to kick the Song Girls to the curb for a year.
Oh, whoa. I never expected that answer.
I
Okay,
didn't want to
McKinney.
give it an answer, but you know what? I need to
Look, you
hear
gave your
Tusk.
answer. You
I
gave
need
your answer.
I need to hear Tusk. I need to see that white horse. I can go celibacy for a year.
Well, I'm pretty sure whether the Song Girls are there or not isn't going to have any impact on that. But Mark Holken, anti-Song Girl. Okay, Eric McKinney.
I mean, so I have to go with one of the other two, clearly. Uh, I think it's just Traveler for the year because you still have the Tommy Trojan, right? He's still gonna come out. He's gonna do the band. You got the sword in the ground. You don't need Traveler for that. And then there's a joke in there about the distance the teams cover. Like there's enough Travelers, I think, for the year where they've got to do these long road trips. Mark's right. You got to keep Tusk. There's just after at the end of a win that feels too good. That one feels too good.
All right, so Eric McKinney, anti-Traveler. Okay, I mean, look, this is a tough question, right? You guys know what you're in for. I mean, you can't go right with any of these. I never thought anybody picked the Song Girls. That strikes me as lunacy. But Tusk and Traveler are both incredible, and I know the guys. At least I know the two guys who claim that they created those traditions at USC. Maybe we'll do another Musings live edition. Bring both guys on to talk about it. But I don't know what to make. I think you both lose a point. So Culkin, you're at 0,
It's
and
safe.
McKinney's at -1. All right, question number 5. In the Best of Times, a classic. Did you see the movie, Eric? I'm sure Mark has. You've seen the Best of Times, yes? Robin Williams as a wide receiver, Kurt Russell's as quarterback. So in the Best of Times, the old guys get together and they play a high school rematch many years later. If we could do the same thing, we bring back the original guys. What rematch would you want USC football to play? Eric?
2008 at Oregon State.
That's a nice answer. That's a nice answer. Mark, can you beat that answer?
Yeah, I'm going 20 years earlier, 1988, USC Notre Dame Coliseum.
Also a very nice answer, and that also is a cheat code for me. The answer is yes. 1988 Notre Dame. I hate that game so much. I hate it so much. Even today when I think about it, it just makes me sad.
It took me 20 years to get over that game, so I can still linger about the USC Texas game at the Rose Bowl in 2005. That's one I'm lingering on right now.
I mean, I got to say that 88 game may hurt more than the Texas game. And that's saying a lot because the Texas game, well, look, that was the first time in my life that USC had a chance to win a national title. I thought they were going to do it. I had seen some national titles before that Texas. That 88 game was just brutal. Just a turnover fest. Notre Dame couldn't even move the football. Man, I hate it so much. Okay. I like Eric's answer, but Mark's answer was superior. It's 1 to -1. Next USC athletic director, Winston Churchill, FDR, or Joseph Stalin? Mark Holken.
Oh, this is an easy one. This is Churchill. I want somebody who's got witty retorts ready to go right off the bat. You call me drunk, I'll be sober in the morning. You'll be fat tomorrow. I want Winston Churchill.
You want Winston. You want Winston. And he would, and of the three, he would be the most fun to hang out with, wouldn't he?
Absolutely.
All right, McKinney, what do you think?
No, I'm not. I'm not shipping USC athletics across the pond. No, the American FDR. I feel like you've got some weird Stalin answer, like why he's the right pick. I'm gonna go FDR and set you up for that.
Now, I'm not going to go. Look, I'm not going to go Stalin. Here's the problem. We can't have purges of the athletic department such that consistently whoever's right at the next level down gets killed in a basement and their picture gets erased from the group photos. just because we're afraid the athletic director is going to be replaced. We can't have that. So it can't be Stalin. Although I think he'd bring a toughness to the program. I do. I really do. Mark is right
There it
that
is.
if you want Winston Churchill is going to be a lot of fun to hang out with, very witty. I don't think Joseph Stalin was known for his wittiness. I do think that FDR is a solid choice because he's American, but Winston Churchill was half American. His mom was American. And FDR was from New York, which isn't really college football country, so I don't know. It's close. I think Hogan gets the point. 2 to -1. It's turning into a rout. I told you things were going to go south today, Eric. All right, number 7.
I forgot to decommit before we started this.
Yeah. Number 7. NCAA Football 25 will be released, I think, next month after a long hiatus. What should EA have included in the new version of the game to make it more realistic for the modern game? Mark Holkin.
I haven't picked up a video game in I don't know how many years. So, I don't know, a helmet with that new thing that everybody's watching social media and playing video games through. What's it called?
I don't even know what that means. You
What's
just
the
lost a
latest thing
point.
that Apple put out?
You just lost a point. You're now back at 1. McKinney, if you give a good answer, this could be a 2-point question for you. So, what do you think?
Yeah, the answer is an unbelievable amount of microtransactions for you. Like if you play a good game, your running back has a good game. If you want him on the roster for your next game, that's $20, right? To keep him on your roster. And it just becomes that. It's every time anyone does anything, you got to kick more money in to keep your program moving forward and together.
If you're over 30 years old and you're still playing video games, ask yourself, why are you still playing video games?
Look, nobody's played NCAA football in
They're
many,
playing
many
video
years.
games on Mark's lawn, all of them.
I'm just trying to look. I think the right answer is landing mode. That's where the computer automatically calls a disastrous 4th down play for you instead of letting you kick. That's what I'd like to see. But Eric McKinney's answer was good enough to get him back to 0. It's Culkin 1, McKinney 0 with 3 questions left. Worst song that still gets played in public places many years after its release, Eric?
I don't have one that I think everyone is going to go, oh, that's it. For me, Get Lucky by Daft Punk has always just really bothered me. I don't know if it's popular enough that it plays all the time everywhere, but that's the one that came to mind first.
Interesting choice. Mark Holkin?
The Macarena. I hear that thing and I just curl up. It's just like, make it stop.
Wait, where are you? Is it still played? You hear that like still now?
That where the places that Mark goes, that's the song they play. They play that and Who Let the Dogs Out. They just in a loop. Good answer, Culkin. You're up to 2 points. Congratulations. You're up 2 with only two questions left, which would make most people think that the worst you can do is a tie, but we know that's not true.
He has a 99% probability meter up there for USC Tulane right now.
That's exactly right. And Mark, this question is for you. So you should be able to ice it right now. What exactly is Judd Nelson celebrating at the end of the Breakfast Club? Isn't he still on his way to unemployment, drug addiction, and prison time?
It's pretty presumptuous of you there, Chris. Very presumptuous of you there that he.
It seemed that his life plan was clear, but maybe I'm wrong. You're the expert on this film. What's the answer?
You obviously believe what the principal had to say. So when Judd is leaving the field, pumping that fist,
yeah.
Believe it or not, that was actually ad-libbed. That wasn't supposed to be in the movie. But if we want to give it some meaning, some context, think about the group that was in detention together.
Okay.
He was kind of the outsider. Even though, you had the jock, you had Molly Ringwald, who was the popular girl.
Ali Sheedy, wasn't she the outsider? She's eating stuff out of her hair, right?
He brought everyone together, though. He made everyone feel like, you know what? We're all the same. And that's what I got from it. Was like, you know what? I won For a day, I was the leader of the school.
He was the
And
glue.
he
He
was
was the
he was
he
the
was
big
the
thing.
he was leading all of the rest of them towards unemployment, drug addiction, and prison time.
And he got the
Eric,
call. He put the earring in his ear, walked off.
yeah, he did. He did. Well, I mean, he was going to be back again the next week, like for the next 6 months. But McKinney, have you even watched the movie?
I have. Look, I'm gonna be honest. I saw "for Mark" as the first two words, and I didn't look at it. After the conversation, though, I'm assuming celebrating the end of the movie.
Just glad it was over.
Could be. Yeah. I mean,
Celebrating with all the rest of us that the film was finally over. It was actually a good movie, but I know how Mark likes it. So I'm going to give you the point just because you insulted Mark's favorite movie. It's 2-1 going into question number 10.
Wait a minute. Wait a
What?
minute.
We're going on to question number 10. We're finished with question number 9. Come on. All right.
I just feel
Final
like
question.
I just feel like Eric just Mario Williams did it at the goal line, and I'm the one suffering for it.
Yeah, no, I know. It's terrible. Question number 10.
imagine if he, after that play, threw his hand up in the air in celebration.
Yeah, they said that wasn't even supposed to be there, but he did it anyway. We left it in. All right. How many times will Iowa score more than 20 points this season? And how many times will Kirk Ferentz make public statements about Lincoln Riley and USC to distract people from that number? Eric McKinney.
So I look right there. The easy answer is just to say 0 and a lot. Ha ha ha. Funny. I looked up, right? I wanted to, because I spent no time on question 9, I had some extra time to pour into question 10. So I looked up Iowa's schedule just to get a good sense of who's on there. And right off the bat, right, we've got Illinois State. So you go, okay, that's one. But then you look at Illinois State last year, and they only gave up 41 to Youngstown State. So I don't know if Iowa's got 20 in them for that game. Now, had they given up 75 or 80, I think Iowa gets to 20.
That's fair because you could imagine Youngstown State being more than twice as good as the Iowa offense.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
So I had to skip that one. Iowa State, they're not going to get there. Again, Troy's a maybe, and then all of a sudden it's the Big Ten. Well, UCLA is in there also. So I'm going to put it at a half. I'm going to put it at well, the over under is 0.5 for me. Maybe they get like a pick 6 and that pushes them up to like 24 from 17. So I'm going to say defense gets them over that 20-point range. Now, for reasons that I don't know, Kirk Ferentz will make a comment every week of the season. Every week during his media, he will make a comment. So I'm going to go 1 and 14 as my numbers.
And look, Iowa fans, if you think, why are these guys picking on us? Well, we're not really. It's just that I'm legitimately curious how many times Kirk Ferentz will talk about Lincoln Riley. I couldn't figure out why I was talking about him the last time. So it does strike me as plausible that he's going to talk about him more. Mark Culkin, that was a 0.5 or a 1.5 or something. Now, put this in context, Iowa did score more than 24 times last year. And that was with young Ferentz at offensive coordinator. So what do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to say they're going to score 20 points at least 8 times this year.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Well, look, you went out, you got a brand new offensive coordinator. Kirk Ferentz obviously knows that offense is the way you win games today. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been popping off at USC and Coach Lincoln Riley last year for no reason. So I think it's going to happen the first time he scores over 20 points. So do you remember the comment you made, before the bowl season? I think it's going to happen every time he scores more than 20. So 8 times, 8 and 8.
Okay. Look, I'm a little floored at this point that you would pick a number that big, but because I like the good people of Iowa and because I really do wish them well, I'm also going to say that Iowa will score 8 times. I like your answer. Final score: Mark Culkin 3, Eric McKinney 1.
Do I get
Solid
everything
win.
under 8? Just I know we're sticklers for coming back to all these predictions and making sure that everything is buttoned up when it actually happens. So
We're gonna have a single 7-hour show where we go back and talk about every prediction any of us have made and just see whether they turn out to be right.
that's what the people want.
That's what they want. That's what they'll get. Just like every other week. Okay, Mark, congratulations. The ticker tape parade will be tomorrow. Is there anything else we want to share before we leave today?
I was because Eric said he had to look at Iowa's schedule to come up with his number. I'm looking at some schedules right now. Ohio State's playing Grambling next year.
Next year's Ohio State.
That was the fill-in, right? They dropped UConn and put
They're
Grambling on.
picking up Grambling, yeah.
Next year's Ohio State schedule is not one of the great schedules of all time. Ohio State does sometimes play people in non-conference games, but they got a relatively easy Big Ten schedule, relatively easy, and non-conference is nonsense. So appreciate you pointing that out. Buckeye fans, you can send your complaints to Mark Culkin because I don't care what you think. Anything from you, Eric McKinney?
Yeah, WeAreSC.com. Use code USC1, 2 months for $1.
2 months for $1. It doesn't get any better than
So
that.
Ohio State fans, do that and then yell at Mark on the message board where he will definitely see it and feel it.
Also, one of you two, and I'm sure I could put the request in.
Yeah.
We had a request to bring JD Piquel on this show as a panelist. So make it happen.
He may be too big and important for us, but we can give it a shot.
I'll tell
I
you
mean,
what.
Schrader has said he'll do it next month, so maybe we'll start having. Look, if we start having really interesting, fun guests, then people can watch the show and enjoy it because they'll listen to less of us. All right, I guess we're done for the week. Yes. Okay, there it is. Thanks everybody. See you next week. Until then, fight on.